Hi, I'm Natalia and welcome to Change the Conversation. I'm the founder and principal of Charthouse Advisory Services, and I'm here today with Melissa Kaan, who is one of my colleagues and a change leader in healthcare. Welcome, Melissa.
Alia, thank you. It's nice to be here.
So, Melissa, I'm so excited to talk to you today. You were telling me about a recent experience where you were working with a team and transitioning them in a really high stakes, complex environment. So can you tell me a bit more about that?
Sure, yeah. So was an academic hospital in Toronto that was in the midst of transitioning their lab service providers. And they realized that they needed extra help to make the transition go more smoothly. And so I was brought in as a consultant, and not having a lab services background, but having a good understanding of the healthcare system and the stakeholders, I was able to dive in and figure out what was going on. But it was a very challenging experience because they were mid-cycle and some things had already transitioned, and then there was more transition ahead that we had to prep for. So it was a lot.
That's so interesting. I mean, one of the exciting things and also challenging things about consulting is you often come in the middle, and often it's where help is needed. So, it's typically not a transition that's progressing well, or there's higher risk and there's a lot to learn in a short period of time. So can you tell me a bit about what the environment was like? So what was happening with the people that you were working with, and what were some of the crisis points or the sort of those burning platform issues that were happening when you started?
Yeah, so previously the lab services in this hospital, they were farmed out to another organization to provide services, but they were bringing part of the work back in-house and then working with new providers as well. So it was a mishmash of things that were going on, and the team and the lab was fairly new. They'd been there for just under a year, and they were still finding their footing, especially as transition was on the go. And so there were changes constantly being implemented. They're a really great and enthusiastic team, but it was also a stressful environment because there were a lot of issues that were not being relayed and resolved in a timely manner. And so there were a number of complaints that they were also getting across the hospital with frustrations. And so that was really hard for them too, because nobody wants to be doing a bad job. And so they were navigating through that. And then the other side were, the people in the hospital who were, understanding that there is a change going, but they are also trying to provide the best care for their patients and not getting the information that they need. And while they can be empathetic to what's happening in the lab, at the end of the day, they need what they need to provide the best care. And then from an administrative standpoint, they're really frustrated because they're seeing all sides. They had invested, it was a significant financial investment to make this transition happen, and that they wanted to ensure that it happened successfully. And it was also introduced to reduce risk in the hospital. And so when there's problems that are happening, there's suddenly all these risk flags that are flying up that they're trying to mitigate against.
So what I find so interesting about what you're saying is that complex stakeholder environment. I think for people who work in change in other industries, there sometimes is, it's a more simple environment. In healthcare and in service-driven organizations, especially where there's high stakes around accuracy of information, around turnaround, around that risk, right? That risk piece. It's a highly complex stakeholder environment, and it can lead to a lot of challenges among the team, especially if they're going through a change. So what I often see in that kind of scenario is, frustration, low morale, a lot of challenge around people just don't understand what we're going through. Is that something that you experienced? Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was a new team that was developing their own culture. And there was a lot of stress because there were mistakes that were being made. And it got to the point where they were so scared of making any mistakes that the smallest decision points, they felt that they need to have consultation. And it made it really difficult for them to have any autonomy in their work and feel confident that they were able to make the right decision and resolve issues, which is really what you need to have and be able to empower your team members to be able to do, because there's a certain trust that you have to have that they are competent and that they are trying to do their best. And so there's only so many SOPs you can create before you have to give someone the ability to know that they can figure it out for themselves, and that it doesn't need to be run up the chain every single time for, small decisions or small adjustments to SOPs.
That sounds like such a challenging environment. And for the folks who are listening, when we talk about something like an SOP, standard operating procedure, we're really talking about how that process gets written down, bedded down to try and reduce the risk. And, part of the challenge in that is that you can't write down every single decision. You can't write down every single scenario. There has to be some autonomy. Otherwise, you're ending up with these documents being 40, 50 pages long and really difficult to memorize and manage all of that. And so if you're, in that challenging place where you've got individuals who are highly competent, highly trained, but they've got a low level of trust because of trust in themselves, trust of the system, trust of the organization, it's a really difficult thing to navigate. So, Melissa, can you tell me a little bit about how that trust got built back over time? And, what are some of the things that you did to help with that?
It was really interesting, Natalia. The individuals that I met, they were all so lovely, and they all wanted to do a good job. And they were really conscientious people. They wanted to do right in their work. And for me, it was really about trying to get to know everyone and build a relationship, especially because I don't have a lab background. I have to rely on their subject knowledge to help me understand what's going on. And for me, it's also just, I'm a new person. I was brought on a 4-month contract as well, initially. And, how do you build trust and show them that you care about them and that you're there to support them, and you're not a fly-by-night, come in, create a bunch of challenges and structure and then walk out, and only for the structures not to work, right? I have to understand how the people work, and what's working well for them and what doesn't work for them. And because that's generally where the root cause of the challenges are. And for me, it was also, in order to be able to learn those things, because there is a little bit of hesitation to speak about some of the challenges, you just have to build trust. And for me, it was about getting to know them as who they were as individuals, outside of work, and what their home life was like, and what their educational background, like what led them to this opportunity that they currently had, and what they wanted as well for themselves in the future. And so that helped me understand who they were, and built that relationship for us to talk about what was going on and how we could fix things together.
Amazing. Melissa, thank you so much for speaking with me today. For those of you who are watching, we are actually going to return in another episode to talk about the strategies around how to make change successful in an environment like this one. So thank you, Melissa, and we'll see you again soon.
Great. Thanks, Natalia.